Hey, this is Max, and I want to talk about a trip that I'm planning, and I'm going to invite you to come with me. It's a backpacking trip in Arizona in September 2018. I will have exact dates soon, and it's going to be to Havasu Falls in the Grand Canyon. It's a 2 mile or 2 night, 3 day trip. It's backpacking into the Indian village of Supai, uh, camping for 2 days. And this is one of the most photographed areas as far as waterfalls uh, in the world. It's very common. You'll recognize it probably when you see the pictures. I'm just scrolling through some pictures of that I found online. This is actually the color of the water. It's a mineralized water. It's manganese, and it's that color. I've been here 3 times prior to this, and that's no lie. It's that color. It's turquoise waterfalls. Um, this photograph is from the parking lot at the top, and you're just looking at the trailhead, and you go down through this canyon. It's an 8 mile hike to the Indian village of Supai, which is an active Indian village that they've been living there for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And then 2 more miles down to the campground uh, at the falls. There's a series of waterfalls from the Indian village of Supai down the canyon all the way to the confluence of where it meets the Colorado River. So it's an 8 mile hike from the campground to the downstream to the confluence of the Colorado River. And I've never done that. There's plenty of other side trip hikes, and I've hiked down probably 4 miles, halfway down the trail to the Colorado River, but I've never really made it down there the whole way. Um, This is in the Grand Canyon. It's not in the Grand Canyon National Park. It's in the Havasupai Indian Reservation. This is beautiful. It's actually a spectacular vista. The hike is, wide open, huge vistas. It's spectacular. It's not as nice as actually in the Grand Canyon National Park. For anybody that's never hiked the canyon, you'll just look at this and say, wow. Uh, if you hike in the national park down through Phantom Ranch and that area, you'll say, wow, wow, wow. So it's very impressive. Here's a picture of it's the red rocks and the travertine manganese laden water. There's a person for scale there. Uh, and this is just the hike down. You're walking through this dry riverbed, a wash, uh, and this is just part of the hike in, the part of the 10 mile hike in. It's there's You're walking through. This is actually pretty gravelly in here, but there are definitely sections of the trail that uh, are cobbly with cobble size rocks, and so you definitely need hiking boots. Some ankle support wouldn't be uh, ill advised. So here's somebody that's suffering coming out. I've done this 3 times, and every time I do it, I send my pack up with some pack animals. The Indians have horses. It's like their UPS trucks. They have teams of horses going up and down all day long, bringing supplies in and bringing supplies out, garbage coming out, and mail. It's one of the very few places. It's the only one of 2 places that I'm aware of that the mail is actually carried by pack animal, the U.S. mail, and it's kind of neat. You can take postcards down there. You can buy postcards down there. You can take already pre-written postcards and just mail them from the post office, and they have a special stamp that says "delivered by pack train from Havasupai." So it's kind of cool at the bottom of the Grand Canyon to send those postcards to your friends. Um, I don't know how staged this photo is, but I've seen people hurting that bad, and so even when I was in my 20s, I'd take my bag down, but then I'd consolidate my bag with other people, and we would put them on horses, and that way we were only carrying the water and the food that we needed for that 5-hour hike out, and it was much more enjoyable. But you can see kind of the trail. It's there's some big rocks right in the trail, right where that person is. So, and this isn't the worst part of the trail. So, it's not a horrible trail, but it's not as maintained as you might expect. This is the main Havasu Falls, and there's the travertine. Uh, I call them frozen waterfalls. So as this water, it's actually depositing these rock layers, and as it migrated through time back and forth across the canyon, it deposited these little shelves of travertine, and the trail actually winds in and under a lot of these frozen waterfalls. This is what I call them. It's pretty rugged. I can't see. You might be able to see that. That could be a group of people down in here, so gives you a little bit of scale. Um, this girl is sitting on the trail. There's some stairs in there, and so that's part of the allure of this place is that it's rugged. It's you have an opportunity if you want to walk to the edge, you can sit there like her, and also you have the opportunity to do something stupid too. But there's no guardrails and handrails and warning signs and safety features. It's not dangerous, uh, but if you choose to be dangerous, you can get yourself in trouble. This looks like it might be the main falls. I don't think that's Mooney Falls. This is just a different perspective with water on the lens of the main falls. Uh, Again, the main falls, and this is right down below this falls is where the picnic ground is, or not the picnic ground, but the campground, and you can just go swimming in there. They say that it's 72 degrees pretty consistently throughout the year, and so here for scale, you can see a person right there. Uh, that's the main Havasu Falls. And so there's these travertine pools below the falls, and it's just these kind of cascading little pools. It's not from this picture you get the illusion that it's like warm or something, and I think that's just water on the lens. They probably have a GoPro or something that they're dipping down into the water. It's not warm. A thermal spring or anything like that. So if you wanted to get online, you could pull up all sorts of information, and that's what I did here, as far as guides and recommendations to what you would should plan on doing. The trip that we would take is out of Flagstaff. Flagstaff is on I-40. It's a 2.5-hour trip to get to the trailhead. And so right at, we would come off of Route 66. So from Seligman, Flagstaff is to the east here. Right here at Peach Springs, that is I call it the driveway for these guys. So from Peach Springs right here to they call it Wallapai Hilltop. Whoops, the phone was ringing. So right from Peach Springs to the Wallapai Hilltop, which is the parking lot, I call that their driveway. It's 66 miles long. There's really nothing along that road except it's to get to the parking lot for the Havasupai Indians to get to their village, the village of Supai. So 66 miles just on their driveway. So it's a very, very remote area. So there's a picture of the, I don't know what it is, it's just where they drop off the packs and stuff. You can see some people have their packs dropped off here. This is in the parking lot at the top. Uh, as far as people messing with stuff, I've parked my vehicle there, and you hear people talk about getting messed with, but I've never really. That might be a tale, because in order to mess with people, break into cars and such, they'd have to come 60 miles uh, in and 60 miles back out. So I think that the tribe has video surveillance and maybe even somebody up there at this point. So it used to be a lot more primitive. I've been there back in the 80s. So again, you can get online and get all sorts of information as far as what it's gonna, what you should anticipate and all of that. So this is actually down in the village of Supai, and there's the tourist information center, and that's where you check in. Again, here's the Wallapai Hilltop, and here's the hike down into the campground. The campground's right there at Havasu Falls. In between Havasu and Mooney is where the campground is. So again, downhill the whole way. On the way home, uphill the whole way. This is just a picture of the trail, so you can see, you're walking in this area, and you can see it's kind of rocky and rugged. It's the Grand Canyon. And then you can see the trail down here, and it just goes. Here's a section of trail. Again, you can kind of get a gauge of the ruggedness of the trail. When you get down into the actual dry riverbed, you might call it, the wash, it gets rockier. This is actually in the village of Supai. You can see their water tanks. It's a significant village, Indian village down there. There's no cars. A lot of horses down there, and you might be surprised. They have some tractors and things like that, but those had to be helicoptered in to get to that village. And so here's just another view of the trail. So it is very impressive. That blue sky, it's just very typical. Big, huge cliffs, but it isn't the same as the section of the Grand Canyon where the Grand Canyon National Park is, but it's still very impressive. Just shots of the trail going in. This is crossing the river, and so that's what it's like, a rickety old bridge, and sometimes there's not even that. Sometimes if you go down to the Colorado River, and I think maybe even there was wet water crossings. You had to go through the water. There weren't bridges. So, but you can see that manganese laden travertine building water. Here's a picture of the campground, and you can see that Turquoise Creek comes right through the campground. So if you look, gear, if you click on this one, it gives you a list of gear that they would recommend that you take. This is a lesser falls, not Mooney, not Havasu Falls. Whoops. So, there it is. There's like a wet water crossing right there, maybe. And she's just walking across the creek. This is where you get the water. So there's like a PVC pipe coming out, dripping out of the cliffside, and that's right there in the campground. That Fern Spring is where you get your water. This is a trail. So this is probably, my guess is this is the trail coming down Mooney Falls, and you can see it's pretty straight down as far as there's people here, people there, and then you can see a ladder, and you'll see more pictures of that. But it's pretty fun actually. Uh, so there's a smaller falls there. You can just go to anywhere you want along the creek. You could swim down the creek if you wanted to. Uh, so again, if you wanted to look at it's Bear, Bear foot barefoottheory.com. Uh, it just has some do's and don'ts, what you want to bring and things like that to have a successful trip. This is actually the falls that are right below the campground. And I've seen, oh, you can see some tents back in here. Looks like I think there's, yeah. So that's a tent right there. And gives you a little bit of a scale of what you're looking at. It's pretty far down there. Then there's those kind of frozen waterfalls. Again, the trail weaves in and out of these things, and it's pretty crazy. Again, no guardrails, no signs to stay back. Proceed at your own risk. Here's a view from the bottom of Mooney Falls, I believe, and they're just telling you don't be a pig and leave stuff around. But you can see they have these. Those are actually looking pretty good compared to some of them I've been on. They were just like old aluminum ladders that were chained to the rock face. And so you can see people climbing up this ladder, going to climb up that ladder. I think you scramble up into this thing over here. And, there's a sign right there. So you come out of like a cave. And this is where I'm telling you that you're kind of weaving in and out underneath these frozen waterfalls to get down the cliff face. Again, the travertine water. This is just in between. This is just a section of the creek that doesn't have waterfalls. Here's a good example of what I was talking about. No guardrails. There's toes. There's cliff. I'm not faint of heart, but there's stuff there that I wasn't gonna approach and walk up to. And when my son Mark was going up there, it kind of freaked me out because he was not afraid of walking right up to the edge. So anyway, you can get a good idea of some of the vistas. And then again, you can get online and read people's opinions on what they thought about their trip to Havasu. So this is a National Park Service site, and it talks about the Havasupai Indian Reservation. There's the village of Supai. This is just a portion of the Indian village. So the Indians are the Havasupai Indians. The village is Supai. You might have heard of Lake Havasu and maybe Lake Havasu City. They share the name, but they're not anywhere near this. They are not Havasu. Lake Havasu is not anywhere near this. So here's a road map, and you can see Flagstaff. We go up to Seligman, and then there's this section of Route 66. Flagstaff was on old Route 66, and this town of Seligman is a really neat town that has a lot of. They've really embraced the Route 66 theme, and they have a lot of old vintage buildings from that era, along with the cafes. So I really like to hike out in the morning. Jump in the car at the trailhead. The trailhead's up here, and then drive for an hour and a half to get to Seligman and stop there for lunch on the way out and go to one of those old Route 66 cafes that are pretty iconic places. So Havasupai Indian Reservation, the 66-mile driveway, this red, they call it Indian 18. That's in. It's kind of interesting. Uh, and then it just dead ends here, and that's you have to hike that extra 10 miles to get from the trailhead to Supai. And so you can kind of see, this pink is the Indian Reservation, the green is the Grand Canyon National Park. Uh, so kind of gives you a good idea. What I would think is that most people would stage the day before in Flagstaff, and then the morning of the hike, get up early, and we would drive as a group and take as few cars as possible. Try to uh, carpool to get to the trailhead early in the morning. Again, it's a 2.5 hour drive, so I'd say be at the trailhead at 7:30 at the latest, and start your hike at 7:30 would get you down by noon uh, to the campground. So that's a pretty good picture of the parking lot there. When I talk about parking lot, it's not Disneyland. It's not acres and acres and lines painted all over. It's just kind of a wide spot in the road right before the cliff face to start the trailhead. And you can see over here there's uh, some of the Havasupai Indians and their pack animals. There's definitely been some allegations of animal abuse and some hungry looking animals that are pretty skinny. It's not the standard, but there have been those concerns. But I think supporting the Indians and giving them money might help alleviate that problem too. So here's some distances: 8 miles from the hilltop parking lot to the village, 2 more miles to the campground for a total of 10 miles. And then you can keep going further down the river all the way 8 miles. And I would say from the campground, if you're heading that 8 miles down, it gets the trail. The further you go in that 8 mile hike, the less pronounced the trail is. When Mark and my son, hiked this about 10 years ago, there were places where we were like, where's the trail? You just kind of keep heading downstream, and then all of a sudden you'll pick up something that's a little bit easier to walk than others. But there's definitely some scrambling, and we only went down about 4 miles. So I think if you went that full, the further you go in that 8 miles, the less developed the trail is. I don't think I didn't run into anything that I was like, oh my God, this is sketchy, uh, as far as dangerous, uh, worried about falling, but it's just kind of scrambling down the canyon, hanging out in the river when you can, but sometimes you got to get around some waterfalls. So, um, so I'm just taking you through some websites that I found. 20 miles round trip. I hope you already have that figured out. These guys are calling it a 7 out of 10 as far as difficulty. Uh, I'm projecting to go in September, which would be past the rainy season. The Grand Canyon, a lot of those features were formed by flash floods. So rain, is like what we've seen in California. Can sometimes move a lot of earth. So I've been there when there's been some flooding and it really mucks up the water and stuff. So I think we're pretty safe in September to have nice conditions with clear water. I've also been in the springtime around spring break, and it was just too cold to really enjoy the water. So I'm thinking September will be ideal. You drop down almost a mile in elevation. I think it's 3,000 some feet. And so in September, I think you could easily have in the 90s, and some exception, you could get up to 100 degrees, but you'll be in this river canyon with water and able to cool off if it gets hot like that. Again, mileages, we've talked about that. The fees and fee structure changes every year. So they have the Indian reservation has a entrance fee that's more than last year is more than $50. So it pretty much goes up every year. I don't know exactly what they're projecting, but they are changing and having a website and stuff. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the entrance fee is going to be. And then it's a per person camping fee per night is right around, or it has been around $30 a night. And then there's a environmental fee that they charge, and then for the horse fee uh, to get the backpacks out. It all changes, and I'll have the exact number for this 3 day, 2 night camping trip. But I anticipate it's going to be about $200 a person. Um, so this was just everybody giving their opinion. There's this Melissa, just as a hater, I think. She gave it a 1. But if you look at the vast majority of everybody else is rating it 5 star. Uh, and social media, people think their opinion counts. But you could look through that if you are interested. Melissa was, and then this person gives it a 1, but they're asking if anybody's selling. So the way they get somebody to stop on their little blog there is by giving it a crappy rating, and then you read that they want to go. So I'm looking at 5 stars. It is definitely a bucket list trip. You're not going to see a bunch of tourists in Bermuda shorts and cameras hanging around their necks and big straw hats, because those people don't have the endurance to get down there. So you're looking at lots of 5 star ratings. This one, she's asking about hotels in the village. There actually are hotels in the village, and if you're interested in that, you could probably get some information online. Again, tons of 5 star ratings. And if you have interest, you can Google up those ratings. This person wrote quite a bit, and she was a lover of it, not a hater. So this is the town of Seligman, and these are some pictures. If you would Google that up, like I said, they've really embraced the Route 66 theme, and they're on Route 66. And some of these old cafes are pretty funky and fun to have lunch. So that would be my plan: is to hike out in the morning, drive an hour and a half on the way back to Flagstaff, and this is where you hit Seligman. And so what are they claiming here? Seligman, the birthplace of historic Route 66. So anyway, they just have a lot of fun places to eat and kind of kick around there and experience that whole Route 66 thing. So what I would suggest people do is really evaluate if this is something that you want to do. I'm going to get some tickets, well, passes and permits and stuff. I'm looking at getting probably 21 is the number I'm looking to get. And I'll come up with the price. Like I said, you should plan on a $200 trip, a 2 night trip with an outfitter out of Flagstaff is right around $1,500. So 200 is actually on quite a good budget. Once I get the permits and get the price established, I'm going to throw this out to you and give you some time to respond. And I'm going to need some monetary commitment from people. And I'll throw it out to the first group, and then whoever, if I still have availability, I'll throw it out to more people. So I want you to evaluate that. It will be sometime in September, is my plan. And then if you wanted to, I think Flagstaff is going to probably be the launching point. It's the largest town. That's where Risa lives, and we have availability to park things around Flagstaff, extra cars and campers and whatever. We can find areas to park those, and then carpool from Flagstaff. Uh, Tim Brennan has a house down in the Verde Valley, which is about an hour south of Flagstaff, and he's been talking about using that as a vacation rental by owner. So if any of you are interested in coming in early, a week ahead of time, or a significant amount of time ahead of time, or staying late, you could talk with Tim or Risa about the availability of that house. It's in an absolute amazing location in the town of Clarkdale, in the Verde Valley. It has easy access. You can actually walk to the Tuzagut National Monument, which is an archaeological site. There's lots of archaeological sites throughout that valley that are developed and lots of undeveloped ones. That's the valley that Sedona is. From Tim's house, it's about a 30-mile drive to Sedona, about a 10-mile drive, or maybe less, to Jerome, Clarkdale itself, and Old Town Cottonwood. Some really neat things to visit in the Verde Valley. So if you wanted to do an extended stay before or after, I would highly recommend you contact Tim or Risa about the availability of that house. And if you're into any other, open for any other ideas, I have lots of them. I've spent a lot of time in that area. There's lots of hiking, lots of biking, just lots of outdoor recreation. It's a fantastic area. September is going to be an ideal time of year to be there, whether it's in the bottom of the Grand Canyon or in the Verde Valley or Flagstaff. It's going to be a fun time. So I look forward to hearing from you and seeing what kind of response I get out of this. But that's my goal. I have to get the reservations, permits fully paid for before I invite people. It is a very popular area, and it sells out 6 to 8 months, if not a year ahead of time, and you can't get tickets more than a year ahead of time. So it's kind of a scramble to get the permits. So that's my plan. You can give me a call on my cell phone, 303-726-0867, 303-726-0867, or shoot me an email or a text. I guess one thing that I didn't talk about is if there's enough interest in people to hire horse pack animal to take your pack down. That's not within my plan right now, but if there's enough interest, I can make those arrangements and figure out the price of a shared animal. I think the pack animals are about $150 each way, so we can pack your pack down for $150. I think they can take up to 125 pounds per animal. There's just a little bit of calculation there, but we can split it up where you can split up the amount of stuff the animal is carrying between other people, and everybody pay their own little portion of that fee. So right now, my idea is 2 nights, 3 days. Everybody gets to haul 25 pounds of stuff on the way out. So you'll still have to carry some of your stuff, obviously your water and your food for that 5-hour hike out. But a lot of the other peripheral tents and bags and cooking equipment and things like that, uh, you won't have to carry out because we'll uh, put it on a pack animal. The other thing is I'll be coordinating, you know, what people are bringing. If we have 21 people, I don't think we need 21 cook stoves. We don't need 21 water filters. We don't need some of those duplicate things. So I think, between about 21 people, we probably need 4 or 5 stoves, and we can arrange for that. I can figure out who's going to take what, so we don't have just tons of other stuff that ends up not being used on the way down. Overpacking on backpack trips is pretty typical, and it's not a good thing, especially if it's on your back.